Hey everybody, it's Ian, and today we're summing up custom. We've summed up rites of passage, we've summed up calendar customs, and now it's sort of a capstone. When I first proposed doing a course in custom, I heard later on that there was sort of a discussion going in through the approval process where someone was saying it should be called customs, surely. Custom didn't make any sense, and a course should be called customs because that is what we would be studying in this class. And I wasn't there to defend it, and so it seems a ridiculously roundabout way of killing 15 minutes in an administrative meeting. But when it was relayed to me afterwards by the person who seemingly then had to find themselves defending the use of the word custom as opposed to customs. That was the thing. That I answer them simply. It's a process. It's not stuff. And when we talk about custom, we're talking about the thing that connects customs together, doing something by custom. It would be like insisting that instead of calling a course poetry, you just call them poems. It's like, well, yeah, you're going to be studying poems in a course on poetry, but what binds them together? What is that sort of unifying thing? How do we identify these things as poems? They're all efforts at participating in this thing that we call poetry, in this process that we call poetry. That they are all unique, they are all distinct, they are all individual efforts, and yet they announce themselves somehow as following in these patterns of kind of different, a kind of verbal behavior that is different from other forms of verbal behavior. So too with custom. It is something that is done distinctly, uniquely, and yet at the same time, collectively, we understand them as following a kind of type, following a kind of pattern. And the pattern that is sort of been developing over the course of the semester is that customs are about the group reaffirming itself. They're about the group gathering through the use of symbols, through the participation in some kind of story, whether it is the story of the group and like the foundational narratives of that group, anything from the creation narratives to episode 4, A New Hope. They use those elements from those stories as little tiny motifs in order to gather together and celebrate their participation in that narrative, but more importantly, their participation with each other. They're gathering together. They are there in order to reaffirm to each other that we are somehow united. We might only be united through the shared participation in these very rituals themselves. We can think about how customs are occasions that are sometimes demand our presence and demand that we do these things. We might not even necessarily like doing these things, but in a way, it is less important what our stance on these things are, and more important our presence and our participation in them because they reaffirm those bonds. You ever, when you make the decision to not participate in a custom, to not be there for Christmas dinner, or to find yourself out of town, the first time, or to not show up to your graduation, that's a statement. That's a statement about wishing to define oneself other than, or outside of, or despite that group membership. And which I think, on one hand, is an incredibly healthy idea and a healthy activity, and that we shouldn't be participating in groups out of a sense of obligation. We should be participating in groups out of a sense of joyful participation. And so when they become obligations, we should feel free to break out from them. But it's a big step when you don't do that, when you don't participate in custom. an interesting way of sort of, I mean, perhaps a slightly sad way, but an interesting way of reflecting on custom as a whole, not in why we do these, but what happens when we don't. So how they take place. So that's, calendar custom works in terms of those narratives, and rites of passage basically work with the kind of the implicit narrative of what it is to be what the implicit narrative of the life cycle of a member of that group, and the claims that are the claims of membership that you are making and that are bestowed upon you by others as you move your way through this group. And so it's about, sometimes it's focused on the individual as rites of passage are, but it's the fragility of the group. These groups don't exist save for the collective effort of its constituent members. It's the same way that tradition doesn't exist save for the collective effort of people constantly re-performing it. Yes, we can refer to it. It can be enshrined in books and so on, but it's a dead thing if it isn't actually being brought forward again and again and again. And hopefully it doesn't need to be rejuvenated by being altered, but it needs to be rejuvenated by being lived, and by being lived willfully and joyfully. So too with groups. Groups don't exist save for the fact that we actively pursue these relationships, these very real relationships, and these very symbolic relationships as well. Our mutual participation in this thing requires that we gather together and participate artistically in this thing. Whether we're talking about religious faiths, whether we're talking about fandom, both work in the same basic structure. They obviously have different levels of history and different existential levels associated with them, but they all function more or less the same way. So the fact that these things are fragile, both as concepts and as actual networks of actual lived people, is one of the reasons why it is such a dramatic act to not participate. Yeah, that's a bit of a bummer of a way of ending a semester and ending a thing. But yeah, I think that because I don't I mean, as I have moved away from unhealthy groups and unhealthy relationships, one of the ways I have done that is by not participating in custom, and by basically these things mean little and littler and littler to me, as the groups that created them, and the groups that support them mean less and less to me. And then other things, groups that I actually care about, that actually I find meaningful and joyful and constructive, I happily adapt their customary behavior. Participating in custom is a process of reaffirming, which is good. Not participating in custom can be a process of negating and disavowing, which can be good, but reminds us that these things are fragile and that they all require work. Yeah, heavy stuff. All right, there are questions for reflection. The final to take home exam. A couple of different questions, the details of which are on the Moodle page, the specific questions, but they're all sort of a piece with each other, and they're all going to be ruminations on this. So, end of semester, overexposed, I can see from the monitor, but that is basically it. Thinking of custom as an embodied experience of reaffirming our participation in the group, and not only our participation in the group, but the group's ongoing presence. That's what it is. Yeah, I think I knew that before the semester started. And going through these various readings really hammered that home. So, as I typically say, that teaching should be a selfish act. That it's something that by teaching, you work yourself through a problem with the help of intelligent people who do not have the same biases about the discipline and about the disciplinary perspectives that you have. So you throw out an assumption, it gets tested in things like weekly reflections and assignments that students write back, and then you think, all right, that thing I said, was I right? Was I wrong? Was I right but didn't express myself? And you hone your understanding. So I think I understand custom at the end of this course better than I did going into it. Hopefully, you understand custom leaving this course better than you did going into it. Otherwise, boy, demand your money back. Don't do that. You can't. Be well, my friends. Until next time, hoping that there is next time. I wish you nothing but the best. Take care, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.